Welcome. Male markers, continuation. Technically or according to consensus I should denominate A. Male markers like Y-DNA haplogroups, and B. Women markers like mtDNA haplogroups or mitochondrial haplogroups. But as said, I am trying, this already in former videos, to give more natural and more memorable names, for viewers to see and secure what matters and the overview. I just want to reinforce that, even while I do not want to fully rely on the classifications that are informed by consensus, I am convinced that these trees and the alphabetical ordering etc. are very important, and I learned to use them often, and started to appreciate them a lot, because there also are many detailed, spatial high-resolution, maps presenting these markers etc. that when independently used, can teach us a lot about migration waves, and real ancestrality, things that we otherwise would not be able to see, and that includes consensus and scientists. Further down the line, they will become very important for our understanding, and for us getting out of the perfect storm. Please see the presentation of figures CDC, life expectancy drops, etc. We all live in our own dream when it comes to our origin. Lay people's dream. I think that many people still believe we come out of Africa, as is to be expected, and I also think that quite a lot of people still believe we come from chimpanzees or other primates, and maybe some still believe that we come from Neanderthals, which in a way makes more sense than modern humans coming from primates. See other videos. Today, science makes clear that we do not come from chimpanzees or other primates, and also not from Neanderthals, but from a common ancestor instead. See other videos. Presentation of figure with duplications, etc. Scientists' dream. Scientists, and those that are better informed, will still think or assume that we came out of Africa roughly 50 to 80,000 years ago, and that some out of Africans populated the Americas somewhere during the last 20,000 years. This while scientists, with all the ancestrality and migrational markers, and all the haplogroup and haplotype maps and trees that were presented and proven by scientists themselves, clearly tell us, and prove, that we came out of the Americas. Please see the presentation of the 1, 2, 3 proof with 1. The R tree. 2. The R spatial map. 3. The R turnover figure. However, this is still systematically negated, in my opinion much too often claiming drift, founder population effects, or simply leaving the Americas once more out of the research, amongst others supposedly because of not being eligible, because they are supposedly the latest, which is in fact a dangerous vicious circle of vicious thinking, etc. Consensus and science still heavily rely on the mitochondrial DNA, presented as the women marker L, and recently it is proven that a period of Neanderthals, long before mitochondrial Eve, already carried the same, now not longer originally hers, modern humans now wrongly supposed original or first-off DNA. At the same time Africa, and consequently their ancestor mitochondrial Eve do not carry 100% Neanderthal DNA, not even present the 2 to 4% some non-sub-Saharan modern humans present, which indicates that mitochondrial Eve herself did not get it from Neanderthals, but from another, sister, group that probably is their common ancestor and possibly that of modern humans, too. The Neanderthals could not have passed on their mitochondrial Eve DNA to modern humans either, because otherwise modern humans would today present 100% of Neanderthal DNA and they present maximum 2 to 4% of Neanderthal DNA. Some non-sub-Saharan modern humans also are absent of Neanderthal DNA, and some have Denisovan DNA instead. That is a whole bundle of serious paradigms that came with only one recent discovery. Clearly some could conclude that this findings puts at risk the main argument and basis of consensus, and forms one more indication of the Amerinds to be the origin of all humans. Especially as ancient DNA research proceeds, David REICH, the out-of-Africa hypotheses present more and more paradigms. Probably exactly for this reason consensus and science heavily invested in haplogroups and trees, to try to find or to finally find a way out. As explained, I split up the haplogroups, just like consensus does, but I will call them male markers and women markers. These markers have no name or order on them, but consensus named and ordered them alphabetically, and also made a separate male markers and women markers tree, and did that in a way that reinforces and insinuates the migration out of Africa, and at the end, the migration into the Americas, and this through Beringia and consequently consensus. Technically consensus's hypothesis is a very elaborated and important one, but also one that still is not proven, this in spite of all the efforts. In other words, nothing proves out of Africa, and also nothing does prove the into the Americas, and surprisingly nothing else important for that matter, except for a growing number of paradigms, which is kind of a scientific doubting, especially when the number of them is systematically growing, as is the case. It is and remains a very well elaborated hypothesis, and the groups, markers, and trees illustrate very well the hypotheses. They are also a kind of propaganda for it. I claim that what they really indicate is A. That modern humans, but especially the most modern humans, come out of the Americas. B. That historically humans are kind of churned out in separate waves of kind of, very, different species, hybrids, and in rather well-defined directions, parts of the world, mainly defined by rivers and roots. A. Modern humans come out of the Americas. For starters, the male marker are MAP, the Y-DNA haplogroup are MAP, and the related are tree, presented on your screen and former videos, clearly show us that we humans come out of the Americas. Since, in this case, the main route was a strong ocean current, the North Atlantic current, the destination was a whole range of rivers, all emptying on the North Atlantic facade. This is the subject of former videos. B. Different humans are churned out in separate waves. One of the best known and earliest examples are the so-called Neanderthals. The Neanderthals, but also the Denisovan before, were churned out of the Americas in at least 3 waves, with different and well-characterized genomes and blood markers. The in-between wave of Neanderthals were the ones that presented the same women marker DNA, bacterial DNA, as mitochondrial Eve, and also as modern humans. Since all important markers and trees show, or proof, that modern humans come out of the Americas, we can conclude that the Neanderthals too came in at least 3 different waves of hybrids out of a much larger number of waves of quite different and definable hybrids. If my conclusion that modern humans are hybrids would make you feel shocked, please remember that science already calls us modern humans like hybrids because we, modern humans, carry DNA of Neanderthals. In this context, the explanation of why or how we really acquired it doesn't really matter. Presentation of image with duplications. Completely another supposed DNA? One could conclude they are all hybrids, because for starters their women marker DNA is, suddenly, and totally different from their ancestors. It is not merely changed a lot, it is simply completely another DNA, another bacterial DNA or simply a kind of just another bacteria or animal. If this would feel shocking to you, or if you would claim that the female marker is not really human, because it is bacterial DNA, then please remember that 8% of our nuclear DNA is viral DNA, that means DNA identical or similar to existing or ancient viruses. Observation. Women carry more genes and thus more DNA in their genome of one cell than men carry, even when the mitochondrial DNA, or the bacterial DNA, is not taken into account. Because of this, I hope that women will not feel derived when I claim that mitochondrial DNA is bacterial DNA and not really human DNA, and that it is not located in the nucleus together with what I call the real human DNA, what I call real DNA, scientists call the autosome. Both men and women carry lots of mitochondrial DNA or bacterial DNA in all of their cells, together it can weigh up to 5% of the total body weight. Women carry all their DNA in double, roughly 1/2 of the mother and 1/2 of the father. Men also carry all their DNA in double, except the chromosome that carries the Y chromosome. That chromosome does not carry the corresponding X chromosome in double. While men have in total less genes and thus less DNA in their genome or per cell than women have, they typically carry male chromosome or Y chromosome, called Y-DNA, that is 1/3 the size of the corresponding X chromosome and contains about 55 genes, while the X chromosome has about 900 genes. On its turn, the Y chromosome is much bigger than the mitochondrial or bacterial genome. Conjunction of life forms? This 8% of viral DNA in our genome is the same percentage, 8%, we humans carry from human DNA in our genome. The list of species represented in our genome is not a very short list, and includes, for example, plants, other animals, fungi, and viruses. We should rather learn to see ourselves as a conjunction of life forms, rather than as a very well isolated, supposedly superior and totally independent race or species. Consensus possibly makes us believe we are an independent species. This rather unconditional and not correct belief could make part of a number of factors that could make that we do not see the storms and threats we are cause of, and do not see solutions to these storms and threats. Quite differently from our view, especially Amazon Amerinds always saw themselves as a part of and a guardian of a whole or a conjunction of life forms that are kind of symbiotic one to the other, and at the end compose and maintain the Amazon forest. This view is all over the Amazon Amerind myths too. What one could learn from this chapter and video is that we simply do not have enough understanding of our own genome and consequently life and existence, etc., to solve our storms and threats. Presentation of related maps and trees with root or roots in the Americas, etc. The 1, 2, 3 simplified proof. Presented again is the 1, 2, 3 simplified proof of the out of Americas. A. The phylogenetic tree that clearly shows the root. B. The spatial distribution and migration map that clearly shows the location of the root of this group and marker in North America and not in Africa. C. The total turnover or the total replacement in a figure from David REICH by the male marker R of at least roughly all males that were present before 4,250, nearly 4,500 years ago. In other such figures, for example, for Iberia, one more recent, or one more hybridization, male marker R overturns the former male marker R, without that one more recent hybridization. I interpret this kind of overturns in the context of my hypotheses, which do not coincide all of the time with the consensus hypotheses, as a proof of regular waves of hybrids or regular hybridizations. Further, I interpret this kind of overturns as a proof of far-reaching organization, planning, etc., as well as far-reaching and dedicated hybridizations. In the case of the Iberia figure, I claim that the R1b-M269 group comes from the same cradle in North America as the former group came from. That they, the newly arriving group, and the former group knew each other, or that their command knew about both and that both of them possibly collaborated. The former males possibly were sent by the command to yet another location. In the case of Stonehenge in Britain, the former males were sent by the command, or went, to construct, for instance, in other constructions, or in other possibly similar megalithic works, in other locations. There is an overlap of time of roughly 500 years, and that is atypical for overturns as we expect them to have taken place in general. A typical overturn means elimination, most probably killing and possibly a kind of enslaving and/or castration of all former males. Thank you for watching.